What is going on at Newcastle United this summer? Now, it looks like Newcastle are close to their first summer signing, and we're going to get into that, who that is, the transfer news on that, analysis on that, and other players they're looking at and have been linked to by credible outlets and what Newcastle's plan is, and why I think it's a very, very good plan. But what is going on? Because Newcastle have Champions League football. They haven't really spent the last three windows, if you're looking at January this summer, and then the January before that. And, I'm not really counting Asula, Lloyd Kelly as signings. I'm talking first team signings. No one's really been brought in. Almiron's gone off the books. I think they made a bit of profit on Lloyd Kelly. You've got to look at, obviously, the money from Minter, Elliot Anderson. There's going to be a bit of money in the bank for Newcastle to spend this summer. And in fact, there was a little bit of money to spend last season, because I'm pretty sure he put in a 50 million deadline day bid for Elanga, which didn't happen. There was Gay money there, which didn't happen. And we know there's very much going to be money for a right winger and a centre back at Newcastle. But I also think Newcastle are looking at signing a number 10. I think they're changing their attacking plan for next season. I think midfield depth, Isak depth, goalkeeper could all definitely be on the card. So let's talk about it, because you brought Paul Mitchell in, a specialist in recruitment, and he is gone. And yeah, did he really do anything? I don't know in his year at Newcastle. I thought this would be a really good appointment with just like how good he's known for recruitment and everything. But clearly he wasn't connecting well with Eddie Howe. And to be honest, you have to back Eddie Howe over Paul Mitchell. Eddie Howe deserves mass amounts of backing for what he's achieved this season. So if Paul Mitchell was gone because he didn't get on with Eddie Howe, that's the right decision from Newcastle. Now, Newcastle had been linked to by credible journalists Delap, Mbumo, and Cunha, who were players that they wanted. Cunha's at Man United, Delap's at Chelsea, and Mbumo is very close to joining Manchester United, which I am very happy about, not to brag. But look, Newcastle had some interest in these players. It didn't happen, but there's also other good players on the market. It's not game over for Newcastle, and the players they're looking at now are all very good and smart additions. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the potential outs. Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Isak's going to stay, in my opinion. I think he's going to stay. Bruno Guimaraes, I believe, will stay. There's not even any rumours about him. And Tino Livramento is the one that is rumoured to an exit. I think he stays. I don't think Newcastle will let him go anywhere. I think he'll stay. And with Champions League football, I think he's more than happy to stay. So I actually don't think you're going to lose them. If you were going to lose a big name, I think it would most likely be Anthony Gordon, but I don't think you're going to lose him. I feel like he's the most likely to go, especially with what Harvey Barnes had help with this season. But I don't think Gordon's going to go anywhere. But if I had to guess, that's what I'd say. So let's talk about the ins. Who are Newcastle looking at? Because there's two players right now. It's believed they're very much working on signing, and they would be two very good signings. Now, what is the news on these players? And then I'm going to do analysis on these players and how I think Eddie Howe is changing Newcastle's attacking plans next season, maybe adding in a number 10, and why this is a good deal. So Sam C. Now, Sam C. used to work with the United Stand. He's a good reporter. He used to get some United exclusives, and I would say he was generally quite credible. He said that Newcastle were interested in a deal for Joao Pedro, as per national media. He was told the clubs will look to agree personal terms in the coming hours. Now, that came out about 24 hours ago. That came out late last night. We've got no confirmation from David Ornstein Romano yet of personal terms being agreed. But, there's a confidence within Newcastle. They can get this deal done, agree to personal terms, boom, 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 boom. Chelsea, of course, also interested. But I do think this guy is a better fit for Newcastle. It was also said by Rob Dorset of Sky and Mike McGrath that Newcastle have intensified efforts to sign Joao Pedro from Brighton. Eddie Howe sees the 23-year-old as a perfect fit to strengthen his squad. And Brighton are demanding over 60 million for the Brazilian forward. I think because of his injury record, you could get him for about 45 million plus add-ons, taking it to 50 million. And I think that is a good deal. I think he can play striker and be back up to Isak if need be, but I think he would operate best just behind Isak. And you could see potentially a double pivot of Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes, which means that if Joe Linton gets injured like he did the last few games of the season, you're not having to throw in somebody else. Because I think, when one of Joe Linton, Tonali, and Bruno Guimaraes isn't there, I feel like you do notice that little bit of a drop. And I think he almost becomes an extra midfield option. He becomes potentially a 10, an extra creativity option, but also back up to Isak. It could be a very good signing. Yeah. So it was also said 2 years ago, Joao Pedro to Newcastle, done deal, here we go. I mean, Romano never gets things wrong, so this must have been a big blow for Newcastle. But it's obvious Newcastle have liked this guy for a very long time. And I've always liked this guy as a player. Like, I know a lot of his goals have been penalties. I know he doesn't have the best fitness record. But I did a video last year talking about Joao Pedro, one of my Liverpool videos I did last year, and why I think he could be a good addition for Liverpool. I tweeted about him last year. He's a good player. I've always rated him. I'm going to get into that in a second. But they've always liked Joao Pedro. Another one they're looking at is Elanga, the deadline David last year. Now, Craig Hope, who I believe is one of the better Newcastle journalists, has said that Newcastle did make an official inquiry for the Forest forward Elanga, but talks are at an early stage. But Elanga is now a key target for Howe, and Elanga could become Newcastle's first signing of the summer window. No Mbumo. I think Elanga. I think Semenyo. I'm surprised you haven't been linked much to him. I'll have you actually. I feel like you have. Could become a target. I'm also surprised Tyler Dibbling links. Tyler Dibbling could become a target, but Elanga is a Eddie Howe profile winger. I can't explain it, but you know what? When I'm obviously Man United fan, watched him at Man United, liked Elanga. He wasn't quite ready, and Man United's a horrible environment, and he's gone to Forest, better environment. Now he's 23, he's more ready. He'd come and start for Manchester United now. But I always liked him, was always hardworking, and I didn't want him to go permanently. I thought a loan was what we should have done for him. But Ralph Rangnick took a bigger liking to him because everyone at Man United when Ralph Rangnick came in was just spoiled, really. It was awful, like the attitude there. And Elanga would just work really hard, and that's why Ralph Rangnick, who's got a really good talent ID, said we should sign Julian Alvarez, and we didn't do that when he was playing in I was about to say Portugal, but it's Argentina. Very good talent ID. Obviously, you mentioned him. He was a big fan of Elanga. Now, it was confirmed by Craig Hope that Newcastle made inquiries about Joao Pedro and Elanga, and that Chelsea have also got interest in Joao Pedro. But interestingly, this could be a very good lineup for Newcastle next season. Very good. Obviously, we're going to talk about what other additions Newcastle should make. Gay, centre-backs, goalkeeper, blah, blah, blah. But that is a Champions League squad. That is a Champions League front line. I know that some people aren't the biggest fan of maybe Anthony Elanga. How does he do against low blocks? Is Mbuma better? Yes. Madueke could be a good option, of course. But Elanga, I think, is a very selfless player, and I think his dynamics will work really well with Alexander, Isak. Gordon's obviously a very good player. I think that this is a very good team. Now, what do I think Newcastle need? I think you need a centre-back. I think Gay's the one you want. There's Malik Chow that's been linked in the past. Branthwaite could be good. Chalobah, again, I think is an underrated player, but I think Gay's probably the guy you want as well, a leader. Elanga, Semenyo, Dibbling, I think would all be good additions. I think Nico Williams' wage demanded too much. I mean, Rafael Leao could be on the market for I think like 60 million maybe. So that could be something worth exploring there, potentially. But like, there's some good options there on the right wing. I think, look, if Forest want more than 50 million for Elanga, I would look elsewhere. Like Kudus can play right wing in 10, Joao Pedro. I do think the fact that Newcastle went in for Cunha, who's not like a Eddie Howe left winger, and he's not a striker, says to me that I think Newcastle are looking at playing with someone behind Isak in the 10 role. I might be wrong, but when you went in for Cunha, he doesn't like to play on the right. He's not a left winger in the sense that he's going to bring nothing nothing similar to Gordon Barnes. He's not someone that holds. He likes to be in the pockets. He likes ball to feet. He's not a transition player, and he's not a natural striker. I always felt that maybe Eddie Howe was moving towards going 4-2-3-1 with a 10, and I think Joao Pedro could be that guy. Kudus could play that role as well. Goalkeeper, it looks like you're going to go for James Trafford. Joan Gossie is obviously off the table now. Lemens could be one to watch. I think you need centre mid depth. There was links to Jacob Ramsey. I think you need more defensive centre mid depth, to be honest. Just somebody that can play 6-8 box to box. It's a shame what happened with Anderson, because I think he would have been really good for you guys. And the striker depth, look, Joao Pedro, the good thing about him is he can cover Isak if he gets injured. And I think Isak's dropped off these last month or two because he's clearly playing with a groin problem. So that's what I think Newcastle need. You could even argue fullback cover if something happens to Trips. Because with the Champions League next season, you're going to need a bigger squad. And I honestly think that, you need a right wing, a centre back, and a midfielder. I think they're the three most important. A goalkeeper, then you're looking at another midfielder for depth, another striker with depth, and another potential fullback. Full depth is what I think Newcastle need. And I think Joao Pedro and Elanga would be a good start. There has been a link to Leroy Sané. I don't see it happening. I think as well with the new PSR rules, clubs are going to be more careful about like the wages they give out as well, because I think it will allow you to spend a bit more, but wages could stop you spending a bit more as well. And look, PSR is obviously a big topic at the moment. The thing with Newcastle is, if they spend big this summer and they don't get Champions League next season, that could cause them problems. But if they spend big this summer and they get Champions League next season, then they're in a very good position with PSR because of the revenue that you will generate. Anyway, I'm going to start by talking about Elanga. I'm then going to talk about Joao Pedro. So Elanga is 23 years of age. He's a Manchester United Academy graduate. He's a player that I've been following for a long time. I'm a big fan of. He got 6 goals and 11 assists in the Premier League this season. What did Jacob Murphy bring? Assists. And I think he's one of those guys that can come in, rotate with Jacob Murphy, give him some help in competition, and play in some good balls to Isak. He's very deadly on the transition, which is what Eddie Howe likes. I remember was it Arsenal you did in the Carabao Cup on the transition? He's very good in transition. He's very hardworking. He can play on the left. He can play on the right. You could play him as a wing back if you wanted. You could play him as a centre forward if you wanted. Probably not like hold up on his own, but like double centre forward, like if you have 2 strikers, like you sometimes done with Gordon this season. But he's going to be right wing, left wing. Happy to play on either side. And now he's had one of the most productive seasons for players outside of the top 6. 17 goal contributions this season. Been very good for Forest. He definitely does his best work in open space, and there will be questions about Newcastle breaking down low blocks, all of that. But you bring in a 10 like Joao Pedro with him and you've got that extra creativity to break down low blocks. I think, Joao Pedro's ability to play in runners, and I'm going to talk about him in a second, when you've got Elanga, you've got Gordon, you've got Harvey Barnes, you've got Isak, that is very deadly as well. Isak's ability to link and play in runners, the creativity there. Like this front four for Newcastle could be very good this season. He can create chances, very good when he's isolated 1v1, but it's the high work rate, the pressing. It's exactly what Newcastle want. He will count as homegrown as well because of obviously growing up in the UK. Smart move for depth as well. And he's just a good solution. He can be depth behind Gordon and Murphy. I think arguably he would start over Murphy. He's a young player. He is the future and his ceiling is high, but it's Prem proven. It's electricity, it's pace, it's hard work. Look, if he goes above 50 million, you've got to look elsewhere, in my opinion, because I do think Forest will look for a big amount of money. They rejected 50 million, but that was deadline day last year. But he's a good addition. As I said, he's a counter-attacking threat. He's going to trap back well. He's going to work hard. He's not going to leave your fullbacks exposed. He's still developing. He's still not even at his very best. And I think with his work rate, his directness, his high pressing, when you look at the kind of winger that Eddie Howe wants, when you look at that is Anthony Elanga. Like, if you look at what he wants, he ticks that box. Semenyo is a good player with running power, of course. Dibbling is more of a talent for the future if you want to go for a young player. I think all of them are good options. I think Nico Williams' wage demands are ridiculous, and I actually think he's a little bit overrated. Garnacho, I think with his attitude, maybe Newcastle want to walk away with that, but I think Garnacho is better on the right wing, if I was going to be totally honest. And look, he's got 20 plus goal contributions this season, Garnacho. Only Lamine Yamal and Doué have more players aged under 21, but I can see why Newcastle maybe don't want to go that route, despite him being up for sale. I think Elanga's a smart one. As I said, strengths of pace, dribbling. If you watched the game where Forest beat Man United 1-0, Elanga just ran through us. It was so embarrassing, man. Defensive work rate, crossing, low cutbacks. That's what Jacob Murphy's done so well to Isak this season. And he's got maturity. To grow up in the United environment is difficult. To go prove yourself elsewhere, leave Man United at a young age is brave. And he's got that personality. Going into Joao Pedro, and I think that this could be the missing link to Newcastle's attack. He can be where Isak is if Isak is injured, but I think he can almost play as a 10 behind Isak, which could work really well if Eddie Howe wants to try something different. Now, he has 10 goals, 6 assists, and 23 starts for Brighton. I know he does take penalties, but, his best role for me is just behind the 9, just behind Danny Welbeck, as a sort of a roaming 10, centre forward, second striker. Player that isn't a bit of a free role, and it'll be interesting to see how Eddie Howe will use him. He can play out wide, he can play striker. I think he's best just behind a striker, but he's smooth, he's technical, and he can link midfield to attack. What I like about Joao Pedro, and I tweeted this last year, he's one of my favourite profile of the players with like Morgan Rogers and with like Cunha, because they're players that have the playmaking ability to be a 10, the ball carrying ability to play out wide, but the strength to also be number 9 if needed. They've got the carrying, the passing, the strength, the hold up, the finishing. They've got all those attributes. And I think, with Willock maybe on the way out, I think this is the guy that, he's not as defensive as Willock, but could come in, bring that. But I think his ability to drop between the lines, carry the ball, get in goal scoring positions, 16 goal contributions, 23 starts, there is good efficiency there, which would probably improve at Newcastle. He's a very intelligent player. He, I think, would do well playing behind Isak, linking with Barnes, Gordon, potentially Elanga if he comes in. As I said, Joao Pedro does really well with runners. It will take the creative burden off Bruno and Tonali. And I think Bruno Guimaraes has been better, actually, since Tonali gave him some creative freedom, because I think Bruno is quite good in the final third. But we could see Newcastle now go to a 4-2-3-1, which could give Newcastle a bit more flexibility. to do different things, and I do think he's ready for that. I think it's a good upgrade. I think it brings creativity. It also improves midfield depth. It also can bring Isak depth. So you could bring Joao Pedro in, Elanga in, Gay in, and a centre mid and a goalkeeper, and that's 5 signings that I think would be a good window, because then your depth is instantly better. And for me, I think Newcastle's base starting 11 is really good. I think if you bring in Joao Pedro and Elanga, it gives you a really good base starting 11. I think you've got some really talented players. If Sven Botman can stay fit as well, that's a big boost. But it's like, as soon as there's 1 or 2 players out, there's a drop off there. Obviously, I think you've done quite well this season because you have had injuries. Lewis Hall was a big one at the end of the season, but Livramento slotted in. Botman's barely been here this season. I feel like because Arsenal talk about their injuries so much, I think people are forgetting that Newcastle have had injuries, not to the extent of Tottenham. I think Tottenham probably had the worst injuries this season. But it doesn't get the attention that Arsenal's injuries get in the media. You know what I mean? I think it's, yeah. But look, talking of Joao Pedro, if I was to talk about his strengths, it's link-up play and first touch, it's intelligence, ball carrying, ability to break the line, versatility, and his end product is good. He's a good finisher, he's got good finishing, good instincts, good football IQ, and something he's very clever at is drawing fouls as well. So I think Joao Pedro could be Newcastle's first signing. There is talk of personal terms being agreed as well, but let's see. Anyway, thank you for watching today's video. See you next time. Bye.